Hello everybody and welcome to your Game Week 29 live stream. It's very compact today because obviously we don't have that many matches because of the FA Cup. Jondre has already said good evening. Great to have you here today, Jondre, and we wish you the best with Game Week 29. But we might as well get into that news straight away, Ben. And I think Game Week 29, one of the biggest news items that people are wanting some answers to is the situation with Ollie Watkins. So yeah, fill us in. What is the latest?
The latest is there isn't really any latest news with regards to Ollie Watkins. This is the difficult one. We've seen him sort of limp to the sidelines in that Europa Conference League tie on Thursday night, referenced as a cut on the knee by Unai Emery in that post-match press conference. Now, the difficulty is with a quick turnaround and having press conferences within that 24 hours. Team news for those players who were involved in those games mean very, very little. And that's going to be the case with Ollie Watkins, unfortunately. Now, there's a couple of considerations here that we have to look at. One, we have to look at the location of the cut. Whereabouts on the knee is that actually laceration or that cut? Where did that occur? And also how deep, the severity, the extent of that problem. We've seen an issue earlier in the season with Alexi McAllister for Liverpool where studs actually went through to his bone and cut through a lot of that soft tissue, and that kept him out for several games. Now, again, there's nothing to suggest that with Ollie Watkins, but because of this press conference happening, I think, within around about 18 hours of that game with Aston Villa again in the win over Ajax, there's simply those evaluations and those assessments continue. What I would say is, he would need to stand a chance of featuring on Sunday. He would need to take part in training on Saturday. Now, if he has stitches, the difficulty is, and like I say, we can't be certain, but the difficulty is of just where it is on that knee. You're always going to be in danger of that wound actually opening up and potentially getting infected. So again, like I say, is it more of just a cut or a slash, or is it something a little bit more sinister and maybe it's a little bit more severe than that, like per se could potentially rule him out of Villa's game and the upcoming England internationals?
But you've got him in your starting 11, so is your consideration that it's not that bad?
Um, he's in the starting 11 because I think he will be given every single chance, at all possible by Unai Emery, particularly on the back of last weekend's, disappointing result against Tottenham. They'll be looking to try and maintain that charge for a European qualifying place, the Champions League. Tottenham are breathing down their necks, so that's why I've got him in. But John Duran could be a player that come in if Watkins was to fail a late test. And this could go right down to the wire. Even if he is involved in training on Saturday, again, a decision may not be made until the Sunday. It all depends, like I say, the location and the severity of that problem. If he's had stitches in that leg, say today, and it's in an awkward area that's just going to, aggravate and open it up, then I suggest that he's got absolutely no chance.
So let's continue from Aston Villa over to Brentford. And what is the latest with the Bees?
Yeah, Christian Norgard unfortunately went off against Arsenal. It was hopeful that it wasn't too serious, but what we do know is it will keep him out of this game and the upcoming internationals for Denmark. So Matthias Jensen looks to be a like-for-like swap there. There's also good news on the injury front with regards to Brian Mbeumo. The striker is closing in on a return to play. We've seen him on the training pitches in recent weeks. He's looked sharp. Thomas Frank has said that. So it's a 50-50 call, but certainly I wouldn't expect him to be pushing for a place in that start 11. He's been sidelined now for just over 3 months. So of course it's going to take a little bit of time to get back up to speed, but he is slightly ahead of schedule. Also, Roerslev there on the right-hand side as wing back. He missed out last weekend with a minor hamstring problem. Thomas Frank said he should be okay, and I fully expect him to do that and start.
Now, we had a question there from John Dre. He said, never mind, but he said, what would the alternative to Watkins be? I think you agree as well, but one of the alternatives that I like this game week for just this, roll of the dice on game week 29, Johan Visser. I think he's a great player, don't you, Ben?
Yeah, certainly when you look at his, I mean, we've talked about Wissa for quite a while now, and he seems to float under the radar. But certainly in terms of his goal involvement and his contributions per 90, that far surpasses, his high profile, talismanic teammate, Ivan Toney. He's a great player. Whether he can consistently do it over 90 minutes week in and way out remains questionable, but that's just because we haven't really seen him nail down that starting berth. And we've seen Thomas Frank, tie in with Neil Mupai up there as well. But I expect Wissa to start this weekend. And I agree with you. Like I say, he's never too far away from a goal contribution.
Do you think, though, that his appeal is a little bit dented because, like you say, Mapai is always, sniffing around the team? He probably might not start, but he'll usually come off the bench. Is that something that you factor in as well?
Yeah, that would be a concern for me. And again, especially as I touched upon Brian and Buemo, returning to that squad, that potentially offers a fourth, cog in that front too, as we've seen the Bees set up in recent times. We have seen him flip flop between that 4-3-3 and that 3-5-2, but really since the signing, the on loan signing of Sergio Reguilon. And it was Reguilon, not Roersleff, by the way, who missed out last weekend. So I got me R's mixed up there. It's Reguilon who's recovering from the hamstring problem, but he has adopted a quite a sort of stable 3-5-2 formation, which means with only those two places up for grabs, 3 into 2 is difficult. Brian Mbeumo we have seen drop a little bit deeper and maybe play in that midfield role, but predominantly it would be part of that front two or front three, and that would be the concern with that.
So let's continue over to the next team, Burnley. So what is the latest with the Clarets, and is that a boost probably to their opponents, which are obviously Brentford?
Yeah, we know what we expect now from Vincent Kompany. He's never going to give you anything sort of really juicy from his pre-match press conferences. He's probed and he's prompted and he's asked questions and he deflects and this time we were asked about specific players potentially returning. All he would say was there are potentially a few surprises in that squad. Now, looking at that list of current injury, really, there's only one player who would maybe tick a box, and that would be Jordan Bayer. Bayer has been progressing well for several weeks now. So it suggests that he is on the cusp of a comeback. But, after that 2-2 draw with West Ham, I could quite easily see the Clarets unchanged.
So continuing from the Clarets over to, if my computer will work, we did have computer problems before starting. Fulham are up next, and the Cottagers take on Spurs.
Yeah, so it's a clean bill of health for Fulham. Raul Jimenez had been the only player sidelined in recent times. That was a hamstring problem. And the Cottagers have been, Marco Silva named the same side for the last 3 matches, which meant that João Palhinha, after serving his 2 match ban, had to settle for a place on the bench. However, Fulham lost last time out at Molineux 2-1. Probably didn't deserve to, and still put in a decent performance. So that's why there's not too many changes, but I am bringing Palhinha back into that starting 11. That would probably be at the expense of Sasa Lukic.
So continuing on from the Cottagers, and the next up are Luton. And I think there is a fair bit of interest in their assets, especially because they've been relatively free scoring in recent weeks. They take on Nottingham Forest, and I think, we'll get onto it in a second, but there could be a good reason to invest in them as well. But what is the latest with their injury news?
Yeah, Chong's been past fit. That was an impact injury midweek, a rib injury. And you're right about the goals. They've actually scored more than Manchester United this season. It's the problems at the back that are the big issue and the big concern for Rob Edwards. And, like I say, after taking a 3-0 lead down at the Vitality, you would expect him to take at least a point. However, the Cherries were able to overturn that and become, I think it was the third team in Premier League history to come back from 3-0 down at halftime to win 4-3. So that's going to be a bit of a body blow. And whether Rob Edwards looks to maybe tweak, his tactical setup for the Hatters remains to be seen, because, like I say, it's all well and good going forward and scoring goals, but you ain't no Kevin Keegan, and you certainly aren't the entertainers. And if you're conceding, threes and fours, it's going to make it a difficult uphill task for every game out there.
I mean, I would love it if they start keeping clean sheets. That's what they need at the moment. But one of the interesting things with the team is they're actually quite good at set pieces. That's one of their biggest strengths this season, and they're taking on a Nottingham Forest team that have conceded the most from set pieces this season. So, a lot of people are looking at differentials, different ways into this team. Doherty has a lot of interest in him, but maybe one of the centre-backs or maybe one of their aerial players might also be a good way if you're playing FPL. Or if you're, engaging with other ways with the Premier League as well. There's probably going to be a differential goal scorer that we're not thinking of that might get onto one of those set pieces. Continuing down, though, and we do get on to Nottingham Forest. And what is the latest for their team news?
Generally good news in terms of availability for the Forest. We have seen quite a substantial amount of players in the treatment room in recent times. That's slowly on the wane. Willy Bowley's returned to the matchday squad in recent weeks, and now we have him back in that starting 11. Of course, they were on that receiving end of another dreadful refereeing decision when Jakob Mulder should have really seen red for the challenge on Nico Williams, and they went 1-0 down at the AMX Stadium. So, Nuno needs to act quickly. It was a little bit of a surprise to see Chris Wood lead the Forest attack last time out. He's coming off the back of a hamstring problem. I think it was almost 2 months on the sidelines, but Owamni is back in there for me. And we also seen the benching of Anthony Elanga and Callum Hudson-Odoi. Now, Nuno said he tried a little, to change things up a little bit. The idea was to maybe hold Brighton for the first sort of part of the game, introduce those players later on against tire legs to make the biggest impact. He held his hands up and he said, sometimes it works, sometimes it didn't. And on this occasion, it didn't. So that's why we have Hudson-Odoi and Elanga back in that starting 11.
We got a question about both of the teams in this game, Luton versus Forest. Jondre says, who would you prefer, Luton or Forest assets this week? Am I correct that Luton are at home, Ben?
Yes, it is. The game is at Kenilworth Road.
So for me, then, that kind of boosts my belief in Luton because they have been a tricky side at home. Nottingham Forest aren't as good on the road. And, after you said last week, 4-3, they'll want a response, Luton. They really want to stay up. They've got a lot to fight for. I'd probably invest in their attacking assets because I think they're going to go for it once again. What about you, Ben?
Well, if you're going to go home, then I suppose I need to make a case for the away team to give us a balanced argument. Confidence is going to be fragile at Luton. We know that the supporters, and they have predominantly, played really well down there. And I am a big fan of Rob Edwards. I just think if Forest get a sniff, manage to get an early goal through maybe a Owamni, then, heads could drop again for Luton. And unfortunately, you could easily see another 3 or 4 goals against him, such as that fragility. They're going to be lacking that a lot of self-belief, that confidence, in the, for all of the good times that they have brought this season, they are down at the bottom for a reason. So yeah, look, I think I would go Forest for me, if pushed.
We've got a good question here from Diego Martinez Rios. He says, nice to see you, lads. Cheers from Mexico. Always glad to have a global question here. He says, how long do you think Kieran Trippier's injury is?
We're hoping for a return after the international break, all being well. Obviously, we know it's a calf issue, so nothing too serious. But as as with any soft tissue and muscle injury, there are absolutely no guarantees with that. But the idea is that we hopefully see him back around sort of game week 30.
There you go. So let's continue over to Spurs. And I guess Heung-min Son is probably the favourite captain for this game week. But is there anything negative about Tottenham or Spurs that should hold back them against, I forget who they're playing, Fulham? There you go.
Yeah, certainly nothing unexpected We've seen Mickey van der Ven limp off last week. That's a hamstring problem. Nowhere near as serious as his previous one that kept him out for a couple of months. We're hoping again that he'll return after the break. Now, given the performance of Tottenham at Villa Park last time, that was, of course, it was 4-0. I think changes are going to be kept to a minimum. That means Brennan Johnson probably getting the nod over Timo Werner. But Dragusin would be the only player coming in. Nicely played by Postecoglou. He said, look, I'm going to tell you straight out, Dragusin will come in for his first Premier League start this weekend in place of Van der Ven. That's the only change that I foresee on the weekend.
Yeah, and it's lucky for Tottenham that they do have a bigger squad now to be able to dip in there at the back. Previously in the season, that sort of injury was, a disaster for them, and they would have had to have dipped into not very good players. So Dragusin being bought in January and able to kind of bumper the squad there is fantastic for them. John Dre has a question about Tottenham, though. He says, triple attack or Porro and double attack? I'd always go triple attack because I think this game week, a lot of the teams involved aren't very good at keeping clean sheets anyway. They're all in about the 20% mark for keeping a clean sheet, like, the best possible teams. An attack is way more fun. But, Ben, do you disagree?
I'll agree with you on this occasion, Jason. I think Maddison, Son, and I would probably take a gamble on Johnson over Kulusevski. I do think Fulham have been in decent nick, apart from, like I say, last weekend's result. They're coming off the back of consecutive wins, and then, surprisingly, they did lose there at Molineux. So I do expect a response from Marco Silva. So I think this could be an entertaining game. Goals from both sides. Maybe a 3-1 to Tottenham.
There you go. So finally, we get to the last team of this game week. Getting any last questions as well. We're trying to be super quick here today for Game Week 29. But what's the latest for the Hammers, Ben? Is it all positive?
Again, we heard from David Moyes barely 12 hours after their game with Freiburg on Thursday night. So in terms of evaluating and assessing those players who were involved in the game, there was nothing to really hear or see, or you could probably discount anything that he would have. He made 4 changes on Thursday night. He brought in back the likes of Kurt Zouma. Of course, the Hammers drew 2-2 last time out against Burnley. So not a best performance. It's whether he sort of keeps belief in that the team that won 5-0 on Thursday night, there are no obvious concerns in terms of injuries and setbacks. In the wider circle, Maxwell Cornet has returned to the training pitches, won't be fit enough. Emerson is training, is going to be there or thereabouts, but I suggest maybe, Aaron Cresswell will probably keep his place within the team. And I've went for Alvarez over Calvin Phillips. Mikel Antonio's there or thereabouts. So again, there's a couple of, 50-50 calls in there. I'm gambling with a couple of these. But like I say, it's difficult. They've got one more session to have on Saturday, and that's when David Moyes, will look to nail down that starting 11.
Zaro has been very kind. He said, only 6 likes. Come on, people. Yeah, it always helps us. Like, subscribe, get involved. John Dre has one last final question. He loves the final question, doesn't he? He says, with Moreno starting last night, can we expect Dinnery to start this weekend? I think you already did put him in the team, though, didn't you, Ben?
Sorry, I lost you there, Jason. What was that?
He said, because Moreno played last night, can we expect Dinnery to play at the weekend? But I think you did put him in the 11 anyway.
I did, yeah, but it's always a difficult one, and it's a hard call to make with regards to that. I mean, you look at the 4-0 win over Ajax, and you compare that to a league performance where they lost 4-0 at Tottenham, and how much weight does that carry with Unai Emery? And of course, Ajax aren't the team that they once were. It is a tough call. I did go with Dinnery just purely because he was fully rested, and maybe that swayed the decision. But I'm going to 75-25 in favour of Dinnery.
There you go. Well, that is everything answered for this game week. We're going to wish you the best of luck for Game Week 29 and also the best of health over the weekend. And we will see you again for Game Week 30.